welcome to another video. In this video, I will be generating what essentially is a generational pattern of consciousness. Which, imagine if the story of one particular individual now could be replicated in the story of all individuals. We need an example, a basis which we can create essentially a moral compass from. Now, base your understanding on one particular story you might picture is a very popularized story within all of human history, and base that particular notion of pointing that generational moral compass back to that initial widely thought of story. What might that story be? Well, you could say it would be the Holy Bible. And based on this moral compass, we then see a generational pattern of moral compasses of essentially the universal story of life, with its separate archetypes taking place in separate personalities, which separate people themselves are a separate archetype to each other separate archetype. You could say you are not the same person to each and every single person. You might meet a stranger, you are completely different in your interaction to that particular stranger than you would be to another. That differs upon your mood, space, time, on and on and on until the stars align. And then we get to the meat of the essential triangle, which is the downward pull of the story, resulting in a generation of widely spread downward lineage, which creates an exponential from one particular story, creates a downward pyramidical structure. And with this moral compass, we could essentially see how from one particular story, the more you gain a perspective and generation over that particular story, the more you essentially arise to the fact that you are that creator of that story, which stems back from you. The more you pull above the generation, from being a child, you then enter being a parent, from a parent, a grandparent, and if you are lucky enough, you would become a great-grandparent, according at the rate at which humans were reproducing at the particular time. And the further up the lineage, you would see that all walks of these folk would essentially stem back from you, which in itself was of a holy experience, because it brought a huge perspective all of a sudden that many people are a result of two people. When we point that back now into the religious aspect of things, which is in the understanding that from two people came all people. Imagine you now as a person or a partner with yourself, a person below yourself, a child or a grandchild. All of a sudden, you would see that this pattern of your life not only replicated in your child, it will also replicate in the grandchild. And this holy Bible of sorts, if you wish, the universal story, which you can base moral compass guidance in the downward pull in the generational lineage of this tree. Now, what might the tree be? Well, you could say it's the generational pattern of the alignment of the family. And the more you understand the family, essentially, the more you understand the self. Which, what is the self? Well, let's get to the meat of what is inside the meat is the self. in the dividing of the experience, we essentially see that there are separate experiences from the human experience, which is the body, the flesh, the bone, on and on and on and on. From the human experience, you then arrive at the self, the internal self, which is separate from the body, but it is the same, united at the same time. And in the mind is where you dive essentially at where you discover who are you, to which you would say, I am Patrick. So, for myself, based on the name my physical body is named, but in the understanding of the self itself, in the perspective of the entire story, which each individual is essentially the replicative pattern of that universal story of being a different archetype to a different archetype, which in itself creates a shift, a rotation pattern, where not just emotion is contagious, which you pass, not just your knowledge, your emotions, your essence, upon the interaction of each and every single individual. You are a different person to each and every single other person, which begs the question in your understanding of the partnership you form in between the partner you are now with. How much do you know who that person is? And the idea of creating a relationship is to create it from an earlier on point in life in order to create a fuller and deeper life experience in the overall hierarchy of things, if you get the perspective. Now, where does that lead us to in our human understanding of the evolution of consciousness? Well, where would you say that leaves us? We are just here and now. And in this particular understanding, we can actively see how in the downward lineage of the tree of the initial source, we arrive essentially back at creation, where it is a emotional connection. And the emotional connection is the fundamental form of love. As corny as that might sound, there is an actual fundamental law known as love, and that is simply the force of attraction that binds individuals to meet in order to create a replication. And love is the only thing that allows individuals to specifically choose to want to be together. Apart from that, most humans would not choose to want to be together, because we have gone to a dehumanized state. The more we evolve in our understanding of ourselves, the more we isolate ourselves. And so in the journey of life, take on a partner, find someone you seek to enjoy your life story with. And in this form of love, you then see 4 different forms of love, which all relate back to the same meaning, which you can have a love for a higher power, a love for your partner, a love and a exotic, companion, and friendship. There's 5 ultimate forms of love, which in Greek they only specifically spoke of 4, because ultimately creating an extra divide between the partner and the exotic would ultimately create a breakage in our understanding of ourselves, because it creates a question: how much do I know the person that I am with? The more you question the partner, the less you understand, because they have been the person you have known this entire time. And so you would alternatively argue that in order to recreate this and recombine it, you would just essentially say there is 4 forms of love, and the 5th is the experience you now have with your partner, which is the previous 4 forms of love combined, resulting in the higher power now generating the story replicating itself in an offspring. And you recreate this pattern the further up the lineage you go. And the more you age, the more you see essentially your story recreate itself, which creates a state of essential dementedness, because it creates a frying of the understanding at which we logically approach the actual story. The moment you simply realize the story is just the story, based on your understanding of the story, is where you find the depth at which you deteriorate. The more you understand from a logical perspective, the more you may come back to life as an older individual, if you wish, because you may now feel more emotionally reconnected within yourself.